Yo, this is a gameplay showcase of Deadly Assault. I'll have a few captions on screen to explain some things during these fights, but less than I do with Shiyu since these fights are a lot longer. I'll also share some tips and more of my thoughts on this mode towards the end. Enjoy the gameplay.
Disappoint our customers. Here at the call to silence. Eliminating target. My blade is already ready and waiting. Restore order. Full power. Victory, the only option. Yeah.
それは必然か
ただの偶然だったのか今絆を裂くように始まる別れのレベル
Not even close!
Out of the way
まるであの日に戻ってきたかのよ
のせるのは約束じゃないやで世界が広くて果てしなくいつかきっとその向こう仲間を守りたいそのための力強く挑む先真実に翻弄されて
Looks like the job's not done.
冬にしては遠くまで来てしまったねどこで間違えたのか散り染まりゆく未来
Yes, don't blink!
命燃やして
Get lost!
無限に孤独が私を強くしたのあの人の顔を支えたいからきっと守るよ目指すは真実ずっと未来いるから強くなれるよ
Thanks for your business.
信じてました
分かってたよ
旅は続くからさあ未来の向き合
Out of the way. Do I back?
君はあなたとは違うからもしぶつかってしまうならそれは仕方ない
Take cover! Take cover!
進め道をやして
Get lost! Get back! Sharp none!
後戻りするにしては遠くまで来てしまったね
どこで間違えたのか
に染まりゆく未来
私が立った髪にはあなたとは違うからもしぶつかってしまうならそれは仕方ないけど命燃やして進め燃え尽きても
Now, I very quickly want to go over a few tips and just some things to think about if you are struggling with this mode. The first major thing that I want to mention is you really don't need to stress about getting 9 stars here. All of the Polychrome awards are available for getting 6 stars. The difference from getting 9 stars is 240 investigation merits, which is the equivalent of half a Bupon, and 75,000 Dennies, so you're really not missing out on much if you don't get them. Another thing to think about is just don't be afraid to spread your teams out more. Going above the 20,000 point total doesn't actually help you get any additional rewards, and it's honestly just for flexing. If you have one team that you see is significantly overperforming and it uses a character that another team might benefit from, consider moving things around so that you can boost that weaker team up a bit more. It's worth noting that while characters and Bangbus are locked in this mode once you select them for a stage, the equipment that they have on is not locked. You can freely move W engines and drive discs around between characters that you're using, and this can be particularly helpful if you've been focusing on only 2 teams up until this point. Throughout this mode, it's also pretty important to pay attention to the requirements that each boss has for its performance points. Even if your team is slightly lacking on damage, if you're able to play around what these stages require, it can help to boost your score up by quite a bit. And lastly, we'll talk about the buffs. It's very important to pay attention to and take advantage of the buffs that this mode gives as much as you can. There are two types of buffs, the stage buffs and the selectable buffs, both of which can be pretty impactful. When it comes to the selectable buffs, the third buff, Interrupt, seems like the weakest of the three to me, even in teams that can make use of it well. The fact that the stacks for it are timed individually makes keeping full uptime on it a bit of a pain, and it means that you'll most likely lose them during your stun window. The first buff, Spirit Break, is great for anomaly teams, so I definitely take it if you're using an anomaly team that's focused on triggering Disorder. Outside of that, I just take buff 2, Swift Resolution. Even on teams that aren't focused on doing a lot of damage from their ults, the other buffs that it provides are still pretty nice, and you really don't need to worry much about its uptime either. I also wanted to briefly talk about my thoughts on this mode so far, and also bring up some criticisms that I have seen on it. As a whole, I've been enjoying this mode more than Shiyu Defense so far, and I think that these longer fights are a nice change of pace for now at least. Even if the content is still focused on doing as much damage as you can, the mode does feel different enough from Shiyu Defense that it's still enjoyable to me. I'm also a huge fan of content that allows you to play 3 teams, since I've had 2 teams that are pretty set at this point, so the incentive to invest in a third team is nice for me personally. And it also means that I get to try out some different team options that I normally wouldn't in something like Shiyu Defense, and less of my characters end up just sitting on the bench doing nothing. I'm excited to see where this mode goes in the future when it comes to other bosses getting added to it, and what other stage effects and buffs will be available, and I'm hopeful that I'll still think it's an enjoyable mode a few patches from now. Plus, I just think it's nice to see ZZZ giving a steady flow of endgame content, and I think that that's a good direction for the game as a whole. I've seen a few people complaining about this mode needing 3 teams, and that people just don't have 9 characters built at this point. I think that's fair, and if you didn't already have a third team built, building one in the 2 weeks since this mode's announcement can be a bit of an unreasonable rush. However, if you already have 2 teams that are able to clear Shiyu 7, I don't think getting 6 stars in this mode is any more difficult than that, as long as you're using the buffs properly and you know how these fights work. I've also seen a few people complaining about the performance point mechanics and the buffs for the Pompeii stage, since they are anomaly focused, and I think that that's totally fair. If you haven't invested in an anomaly team at this point, then you probably are going to struggle with that boss in particular. But if you're in the position where you have 2 teams that you're using to clear Shiyu 7, and neither of them are an anomaly team, I'd imagine that you could just put both of those on the Sacrifice and Marionette sides, and still get your 6 stars from there. Lastly, I've seen some concern from people about 9 stars being required in the future. In the Redo Renovation Talk Volume 3 post, there's a line that states that during version 1.4's Deadly Assault, proxies can get all Polychrome rewards by earning 6 stars. The fact that they are specifying the version number here does leave things up in the air for whether Polychrome rewards might get added to the other stars later down the line. If you're already clearing Shiyu 7 fine and you have 2 solid teams for that set, then I'd imagine you should be able to get a third team going before this change would take place if it does end up happening. And if you're not in that position, then you should just be focusing on getting 2 solid teams for Shiyu anyways, since it gives more rewards overall. But that's where we'll end things here for today. Let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts on this mode are and how you've been doing in it so far. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like, it does help this channel out, and if you want to see more content from me, consider subscribing. I'll have a Shiyu Defense showcase of a few Miyabi teams coming very soon, and sometime within the next week and a half, I'll have a video covering my full thoughts on Miyabi and her teams as a whole. I've really been enjoying 1.4 so far, and have been having a ton of fun with ZZZ, so I should hopefully have some more consistent content coming in the near future. Thanks, as always, for watching.